Welcome to Talbott.tv. I'm here with Chloë McCardel from Australia, and she is a world record holder. And according to Wikipedia, on October 22nd, 2014, she completed an unprecedented swim from I can't even pronounce it, South Victoria?
Eleuthera.
Eleuthera, thank you,
Yeah.
island to Nassau, Bahamas, which is 124.4 kilometers or 77.3 miles in 41 hours and 21 minutes, which is unbelievable. She set a new world record, longest unassisted ocean swim conducted under the rules of marathon swimming. We also have a ton of other amazing accomplishments to reference from her website, which you can find at chloemccardel.com, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And you're in the International Marathon Hall of Fame, the International Marathon Swimmer of the Year for both 2014 and 2015. And you've crossed the English Channel an unbelievable 31 times. That's insane. So welcome, Chloë, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Talbott. I'm so excited to be part of your TV series and to be number one. That's really special.
Awesome. Well, it's very fortunate that I was able to not only run into you in San Francisco at the South End Rowing Club, where you gave a kind of like an intro to open water swimming. Me and my friend Chris and Heidi, we joined in even though we weren't new to open water swimming, but there was a few newbies there and we had a ball out there.
It was fun.
That was really, really cool. So tell me, how have you been surviving the COVID crisis?
Well, I've had a little bit of COVID cabin fever. I'm not sure how everyone else is going that's watching this. I live in Sydney in Australia, as you said, so in a 3-bed small semi-detached place. So it's small. I live there with my partner and he has children that come over sometimes and 3 dogs. So it can get a bit chaotic at times.
I bet.
And, like a lot of people, I've transitioned to working from home and my partner's working from home. So our antidote to the claustrophobic living is to go for walks as much as possible. And the good thing for me is that the oceans where I swim, the beaches are still open and you're allowed to swim. So we're not allowed to congregate on beaches. Everyone has to keep moving. So people are allowed to walk on the beach or swim, or there's a lot of surfing here, Sydney, you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I'm actually really fortunate in the scheme of things, but I must admit I've had some pretty serious cabin fever. So maybe your watchers can relate to that.
Yes, well, I'm super jealous because they closed the beaches here in Southwest Florida a couple of weeks ago. And I didn't say this, but I snuck out a couple of times.
This is recorded, right?
No. They're going to come and arrest me. Yeah, so it's I'm just anxious for them to open up the beaches again and open up.
Yeah, for sure.
They do. Yeah, I've seen a couple of boats out there and paddle boarders. So they're not super strict. I think they're just trying to avoid the masses doing the spring break type of thing.
Yeah.
But we're all pretty good down here to keep the social distancing rules and stay safe. So that leads me into the next question. Are there any similarities between kind of what we're dealing with this current crisis and swimming the English Channel?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I had a chat to some of my friends, which thanks to English Channel swimming and the marathon swimming is spread all across the world. And I had some reflections with them that in a way it's kind of similar to swimming the English Channel, what we're going through, in that when you start an English Channel swim, and this goes for any other marathon swim, I just keep referring to English Channel swimming because it's where I have my most experience and where I've coached many swimmers to swim the channel. Mm-hmm. So when you dive in and you start an English Channel swim, you know where you want to go and where you want to finish, because the successful outcome is swimming all the way to France, which is 34 kilometers, and getting to the other side, clearing the waterline and officially swimming the English Channel. So you know where you want to be.
Yeah.
And you know where you are right now, which is the start, but you don't know how long it's going to take to get to the other side. Like, it's just an open book of potential time, distance, because we know in a straight line it's 34 kilometers, but you don't know how long with those really strong tides, up to 7-meter tides, where it's going to take you. You don't know what sort of conditions you're going to get. It could be forecast to be a fairly smooth or a little bit of a choppy swim. And then, you could get some stormy sort of weather and huge washing machine waves of 2.5 meters. That's a real potential.
Wow.
So I think one of the reasons the English Channel is so famous is because it can be quite treacherous. There's so many variables that can come at you at any time, like the jellyfish, or maybe you've got to stop for traffic, or you get these waves coming out of nowhere, or a current that tries to stop you in a way getting to France where you want to go when you're near the end. So we were reflecting the similarities to this COVID crisis because we know where we are now.
Yep.
Everyone I know is in some sort of a lockdown situation.
Definitely.
We know where we want to be, which is on the other side and free from these this repressive sort of social distancing and restrictions on our freedom and our lifestyle and access to work for some of us. But we just don't know how long it's going to take to get to that other side. And no one that I'm aware of knows. No one can give us any exact information of when this is all going to be over and our lives can go back to normal, if we will ever go back to living the way we used to live.
So
There's
true.
no governments and there's no health authorities that can give us definitive answers. And I think that uncertainty of just not knowing exactly what's happening next, not knowing if we're going to get further restrictions, or not knowing how far this pandemic is going to spread in our local communities, like, are we going to have outbreaks locally to us? Will our lives be personally threatened? I mean, some people, for example, living in New York are already in a very high risk area of infection.
Right.
So, and it's not just New York. It's just that I'm seeing in a lot of media that's a bit of a hot spot, and there's been a lot of deaths in New York. So, there's so much uncertainty. It's like swimming the English Channel, and you just need to keep going. And a saying we have in the English Channel, if you're really struggling, is just swim feed to feed. So most feeds are about 30 minutes apart. So a feed, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, if you're unfamiliar with marathon swimming, is when you take food or liquid. So that gives you sustenance, so energy, hydration. And that other little thing which a lot of us don't recognize, but I think that we sense, is that human connection. So when we take a feed in marathon swimming, we're past it down usually a rope or something similar like a pole. We're past it to our support crew. So people in the boat who care so much for us and want us to succeed, and they want to connect with us. So it's that moment every 30 minutes to connect. So there's a saying that, just if you're struggling, just swim feed to feed. And that's helped me really get through some tough marathon swims. And then advice I give to others is, if you're even struggling trying to swim the next 30 minutes and getting to that point, then break it down, which is swimming stroke to stroke. As long as you keep your hand moving into the water and start that next stroke, literally one stroke after another stroke, and just kind of focusing in on that moment, because focusing on the moment is something you can control, and it's just something small, just a small step
Awesome.
or a small stroke forward. So I think there's a lot of similarities to this COVID crisis, even though it is on a kind of a different platform completely. But those that are involved in marathon swimming and have been involved in marathons as a swimmer, would know that we have tested ourselves, and we've come through so much just to prepare and train and get ready for a marathon swim, let alone get in and then complete that darn thing. So, hopefully the listeners and the watchers who are consuming this later would hopefully take something from that, in that we are so strong. And it's not just us, our families, our communities, we all have this strength and resolve that we can tap into, if we can find it. So yeah, I think there's similarities. I can talk about English Channel swimming all day, so you're going to need to interrupt me and just say, calm down, Chloe, calm down. Let's move on to the next point.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's, I have a little bit of experience with the English Channel, because I did a English Channel relay swim headed up by you and Louise Darlington, and it was 6 of us. So, it was, I got 2 hours in the water, but, we didn't have too many issues, but I talked to people who a week before they swam through like hours of jellyfish and just pain the whole way. And another guy who was doing his solo attempt for like the 10th time, and every time he had some condition, it was weather or massive swells like you described. So yeah, it's the day-to-day, stroke-to-stroke. I think those recommendations are incredible, and it's not only for marathon swimming, but just just surviving the COVID virus and having some sort of strategy on looking to the next day and moving forward. I totally agree. So I want to ask a question that came from Facebook, because before we had this interview, we posted on a couple places on social media. And so this is a question that comes from Brian Burrows on Facebook. He says, the mental and physical feats performed by a marathon swimmer are staggering, but often the path to get there is so much more than what they do on the day. So knowing the swimmers that you have coached and the obstacles that they have overcome, do you ever sit back at simply awestruck at their journey?
Yes, definitely. I think when you're in the middle of something, it's hard sometimes to get perspective on, what you're going through, or the sacrifices you're making, or the achievements when you achieve something. I've heard many tennis players say that, they win these grand slams and then they retire, and it's only when they retire that they realize the enormity of what they've achieved. And you may have heard of Olympians talk about that aspect as well. I think that when I started English Channel swimming, I didn't really understand what an achievement it was. I guess I just kind of expected that I would swim the English Channel, and then I did. So I was like, okay, well, I just did what I expected I was going to do. When I started coaching people to swim the English Channel, which came a few years later, then I really appreciated how hard it is for your average person to get in England, swim to France. But on top of that, as Brian is talking about, it's all the things behind the scenes that no one else really sees unless they're a part of your, close family or close work or close friendship group. I think it comes back to that analogy that we may have seen before, which is that iceberg where you see the 20% at the top. People see that sort of work that you're doing. They might hear that you do a 6-hour training swim in cold water, but they don't know that actually you've been doing 3, 4, 5-hour swims for a few times each month for 6 months or for 2 years. So when I got really involved in coaching and I was going through the journey with others, I kind of really appreciated how much work and effort they were putting in, because when I was doing it, for me, I was just so focused and blinkered that I didn't realize, the gravity of what it takes to swim the English Channel. So I guess I got a new appreciation for the challenge, ironically, of preparing to swim the English Channel and swimming it when I saw it as an observer. And when I felt really connected to their results. So it's not like it was just some person in a community or someone I read about it in the TV or newspaper. It's, I step by step, week for week, I'm highly invested in their outcome. And I just, when I'm on those boats crewing for those swimmers and I know the hard work they've been through and I see them swim through some really hard conditions, I'm just so overwhelmed when they finish it. So I did gain a new respect for English Channel swimming when I became a coach.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really amazing that you're able to coach other people, because it's a huge challenge, and having a good coach is critical. And I imagine you're an amazing coach, just from what I've heard and my experience with you. So that's like, we need more coaches and people like you. So really appreciate that. So let's look at another question. This is, I'm going to butcher the name, but it's Philemon Philippou, and this question also comes from Facebook. If you could no longer swim for whatever reasons, how would you transfer your endurance skills, and what would your next dream sport be?
Dream sport.
Yeah, like how would you transfer your endurance skills to your next dream sport?
Well, Philemon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this a little bit on its head.
Yeah.
So I've been doing marathon swimming now for about 13 years, and it's been a very intense lifestyle to balance the commitment of training consistently, because I like to swim at a very high level of marathon swimming, and then also to balance the lifestyle of, you know, being in a relationship, investing time in family, friends, and then earning an income, because marathon swimming, unlike the big high profile sports like tennis in Australia anyway, cricket,
Right.
NRL, baseball,
Yep.
basketball, there's no money in, like literally no money in. So I probably wouldn't move into another sport. I can't see myself trying to excel in another sport. So I'm going to flip the question in that what I'm going to say, Philemon, is that if I could no longer do marathon swimming anymore, how would I transfer those endurance skills to something else that I would want to do in my life? And the answer to that question, which I've just created for myself, is that I love connecting with people. I love inspiring people to bring out the best in them and to believe in themselves, because I think a lot of people are a bit nervous and lack the confidence and self-belief to set big goals and believe that they themselves are worthy and can achieve them. So I love inspiring people. I love empowering people. And for me, empowerment is just as important, if not more important, than inspiring, because by empowering people, you're actually helping them develop skills so that they can take themselves to the next level. And then if you step away, that they still have those skills and that they can keep getting those results that they want. Whereas inspiration is generally a short-term boost for people. I believe empowering people, like when I coach people to swim the English Channel, I believe that's an empowering experience for them, and they can transfer those skills after our relationship of coach and athlete is finished. So if I wasn't able to do marathon swimming, I would focus more on activities where I can inspire and empower people. So that has been coaching, is what I've been doing alongside my own marathon swimming, which we've talked about. Right. But I've also moved into the leadership development field. So whilst in Australia, which is not most months, not all months of the year, because I travel a lot with the marathon swimming, but I've been now moving into working in corporates, in organizations, helping people with communication skills, leadership skills. And I love that. I thrive on that interaction. I thrive on empowering people. So I think I would just do more of that. I would keep finding ways to connect with people, empower and inspire them.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. So I got one more Facebook question from Fred Renali. Do you ever see any sharks? And if so, which type of sharks do you see and what is their behavior like?
I get so many questions about sharks. I think this is probably the most common question, mostly from non-swimmers, because a lot of them think about how many encounters have you had with sharks, and I think that's just really common if you're an open water swimmer, that you must just run into sharks all the time. I think because of the media disproportionate coverage of shark attacks and shark deaths, because there's so much drama around sharks. You know, these apex predators that cruise around in the sea, and humans suddenly go from being the apex predator on Earth to being, you know, prey in the ocean. So I think it's really fair and understandable that for a non-open water swimmer to be really concerned about sharks. Like, I can understand where they're coming from. But if there's anyone, you know, watching this who is someone who thinks that sharks are a big issue in open water, that I really want to reassure you that it's actually super rare to see anything except a small reef shark who is just happy cruising along at the bottom of the reef or the sand, doing its own little thing, and it is very much not interested in you. Like, that's the experience I've had. So I'm going to say yes, I've seen sharks, but I've only ever seen harmless reef sharks and none of them have ever been interested in coming close to me because they're busy doing their own little thing. And that includes in the Bahamas. So I did swim for 41 hours non-stop, day and night, and I had a whole team looking for sharks. The world record. They were actively, their role was like shark detection. That's what they were trained in. And that whole time, it was quite, I have to share this is quite funny. Their job was to find the sharks, not my job. Like, my job was to swim, non-stop. So I'm like, oh, I'm swimming along. Hey, hello, you might want to just notice that there's some sharks over there. So under the water clarity in the Bahamas, for those of you that have actually been to the Bahamas, you know what I'm talking about. It is crystal clear. Like, the clarity is amazing.
Right.
So I could see them though about, I don't know, 30 meters away. I could see them clear as day. And what was really interesting, I thought, and remember, I'm swimming for 41 hours nonstop with very little stimulation. So anything happening is extremely interesting.
You sure?
At that point. So I'm just like seeing sand, minute after minute, hour after hour, just like sand. And then suddenly these two little shapes come, and I'm like, yes, something to look at.
Right.
So they're like cruising around, and they're doing their own little thing. And then I noticed suddenly they changed direction and made a beeline, or a shark line, straight to one of the kayakers ahead of me, not to me.
Really?
And I thought, oh, that's weird. And then what I think they were doing is that they were curious about the shark shield, ironically, to keep the sharks away.
So
they were attracted to the shark shield. Yeah. So they both got close. And then one of them touched the shark shield because it was getting closer slowly.
Okay.
It seemed curious from my vantage point. They weren't like attacking the shark shield. So they're curious because sharks are known to be curious creatures. Yeah. And then suddenly it just pulls away really fast. So I think it may have got zapped from the electrical magnetic currents or whatever that was coming off the shark shield. Yep. And that was it.
Wow.
So yeah, I would say as long as you're just make some... if you ever want to swim in the open water, this is more to people who don't swim in the open water regularly. If you're worried about sharks, find some locals, some local fishermen, locals that swim at the beach, or speak to locals that have businesses right near the water's edge that may have an idea about whether there are sharks around and shark activity and the types of sharks. And if it's an issue, because they're the ones that are going to know. They always go to the local people with this sort of knowledge. Yeah, because they've got day-to-day experience or seasonal experience, and there are some places where I will not swim because I don't think it's a smart idea to swim there. Right. So for example, in the Gold Coast, I know probably a lot of your listeners don't live in Australia, but you may have heard of the Gold Coast, which is in the Queensland. It's a popular holiday spot. Yep. There's lots of lakes and estuaries, and it's known that bull sharks swim in there. Right. So I always stay away from any waterway that I hear that bull sharks are present in. And there's quite a few of them in Sydney Harbour as well. So it's rare that I would swim in Sydney Harbour, even though it is gorgeous with the Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House and things like that. So, you do your research and then, just swim where it's generally known as safe, and you should be fine.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, we get a lot of sharks down here in Southwest Florida, but not as many as they do in the Northeast Florida. But we get bull sharks, and occasionally we get great white sharks down here. I've never seen a shark while I was swimming, partly because the water's so murky here. But when I was swimming around Lido Key, my pilot, my kayaker, saw a shark go right underneath me. So I didn't see it, but my kayaker did. I think it was like a 6-foot shark. So.
Can I tell you another shark story? Do we have enough time?
Please. Sharks are the best. So.
Okay, so in 2015, it was a really big year for me. So I swam the English Channel 3 times in 1 week, single crossings. And then 6 weeks later, I did that triple nonstop crossing. Now, in between those two things, I flew to Massachusetts to help one of my swimmers who'd been in a relay the year before, Grant. So to help Grant swim between Cape Cod and Nantucket.
Wow.
So in advance, I was like, Grant, are you sure this is a good idea? Because Cape Cod is known as a breeding ground for sharks. I can't remember which variety it was. It may have been great whites. I have to Google it.
That's where Jaws took place, I think.
I'm not surprised, right? I'm like, literally like, really, you sure you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, I think I'll be fine. I can do this.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay. So he starts the swim because a lot of swims in marathon swimming started at night. So he starts at night. I'm like, this is in advance. Sorry, I'm jumping between time. I'm like, I think you should use my shark team. You know, I had them for the Bahamas and then the Cuba USA swim, which I attempted the year before. I think you should have my shark team. And he's like, okay, I'll use your shark team. Because they're based in the US, so it was easy to kind of get them over.
Cool.
So he has my shark team. I'm worried about sharks. They're worried about sharks. He's pretty cool about this idea. He's starting at night and like we're all just like, really, I don't know what the word is, like hyper aware for anything that could be moving or anything that looks like a triangle coming out of the water. So things are going well, you know, we move into daylight, everything's going fine, no shark sightings. So we kind of relax a little bit. Anyway, he's doing really well. No one had ever done that course for this swim before, so it would have been like an epic first, which is super exciting. Another guy, I can't remember his name, but he'd swum from Nantucket to Cape Cod, so the other direction. Okay. So swimming along, and then near the end of the swim, he's doing so well, like the tide completely changes on him, pushing him away from where we want to go. So it's like high pressure stress. It's like when people swim the English Channel and the tide turns right before they're supposed to land in France, and then they're swimming against the tide and it's real intense. And then someone sees a shadow or a shark, we're not sure, but there was a rule in the boat that you can't say the word shark. Okay. So we had some other word, I can't remember what it was for. Anyway, so the shark team jumped in. We haven't said the official word. They get in just for preventative measures because no one wants to freak Grant out unless it's a real threat and he has to get out.
Right.
So they've got like flippers and stuff. So they're keeping up just because he's a good swimmer next to him. And then they kind of just buddy next to him, obviously not touching him because that would break marathon swimming rules. Right. And then he finishes the swim and, you know, everyone's on a high, super excited. Yeah. There's locals at the finish at Nantucket and it's all good. And then when we were celebrating, I didn't see it, but when we were celebrating at the end, a few people that were around were like, oh, hey, did you see that decapitated seal over there? And we were like, holy moly. So there were definitely some hungry sharks in the area. Right. But luckily, Grant was fine. He didn't get touched. But unfortunately, the seal didn't live through the incident.
Oh, poor seal. Well, that's a good thing that it was not Grant. There's some, I don't know how many open water swimmers have been attacked by sharks. I know it's typically like surfers that get most of the attacks, or abalone swimmers in San Francisco. There's a lot of abalone swimmers that are like, you know, they're free divers or scuba divers. From the great whites out there. There was a guy who was swimming the Maui Channel or the Channel.
Yeah, I think it was a Kauai, is it?
Yes, and he got bitten by the cookie cutter shark.
Cookie cutter. I was just about to say that. That thing looks gnarly.
Oh my God.
Do you have photos of that? If you have, you should try and put it on the TV.
Yeah, you got to Google the cookie cutter shark because that's crazy.
Or maybe interview him because I would.
I will. That'll
be great.
Yeah, like show off his scar on his tummy. Because that thing they come from deep, and you know, a mile, 2 miles below the surface, and they come up, take a bite out of you, and then go right back down again.
So, they just take a little chunk, and then they're gone.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, it was right in his tummy where he actually had to go and get surgery to stitch up his abdomen because his actual, I don't know the exact story. I'll have to have him tell it, but I think his intestines might have started coming out. So they had to hold it in and fly him to the hospital, get it stitched up, but he's back in the water again. Yeah, so it happens. There are shark attacks. There's always good shark stories, but I love open water swimming, but half the time I freak out about sharks, but then I just keep swimming and realizing the statistic is pretty rare to get bitten, so I get past it, but sometimes it consumes all of my mental energy while I'm swimming. So let's move into a couple of questions. Now, you posted a ton of great questions on Instagram. And some people ask their own questions, and some people basically, said, just letters from index points to those questions. So one of the questions that was popular was the question K, and this came from Drew K 2005 and Lisa or Liz and Lysandra 0108. And so let me read off the question number, letter K. What was your most bizarre moment whilst swimming?
Oh, this is good. So people don't necessarily think to ask me this, and I thought I'd throw that in myself because
Awesome.
I had, you have a few strange stories when you do a lot of marathon swimming, like things are going to happen. So when I was doing this Bahamas World Record 2014, I was really fortunate to have two kind of teams and two boats working to support me because we knew it was going to take a while and people needed to have time off. So literally every role there was needed to be two people or three people that could do it so they could rest. So we had two boats, including kayakers and me and blah, blah. So we were like a little kind of flotilla of adventure boats and one swimmer. Anyway, so we were out there moving quite a fair distance, 124 kilometers. Not very fast. I was averaging 3 kilometers an hour. So it's not like we were a threat to anything. We were just paddling, just quietly going along doing our thing. And in the middle of this second night, I was out there for 2 nights. So the middle of the second night, I'm like delirious. I'd had severe box jellyfish stings the previous night, so the first night of my swimming. So that had triggered, ironically, a drop in blood pressure and then hypothermia, even though the water was super hot. It was 27 Celsius and the air temp during the day was 27 and didn't drop much at night. Wow. So I'd gone through this spell of hypothermia, exhaustion, hallucinations, and now we were at about hour maybe 36, so coming near the end of the swim, but I didn't know for sure we were near the end of the swim. It was just in the middle of the second night. I was delirious. Anyway, so I was really close to a kayaker because it gave me this sense of connection and safety and security, just physically being close to one of my support crew.
Of course.
So I was only about 2 meters away from this kayaker. And then out of the middle of nowhere were these blue, I don't know, strobe kind of blue lights. Okay. And it started off in the distance and then it got closer. And I thought, oh my God, it can't be aliens. That doesn't make sense. Because when you're swimming for like a super long period of time, your mind can start playing games with you. Right. So then, well, at least it does for me. So when this happens with me, I've got to try and figure out, is this real or is this a creation of my brain? So I'm having this kind of like to and fro conversation. Is it real? But if it's real, there is no logical explanation for blue strobe lights. Right. And then if it was real, how come no one else is kind of reacting to it? So maybe it is just me. So then I thought, I better not say anything because if it's just me, if I'm having really bad hallucinations, maybe they'll pull me out of the water. And you don't want that. Exactly, I don't want that. There's only 2 things that I really think about properly when I'm swimming along something like that is A, I need to get to the other side, and B, I need to make sure that no one pulls me out. Like I can't give someone a reason or let on if I'm really struggling because they might get worried and then go, shit, we should pull her out. So I'm like, okay, don't say anything. You're probably hallucinating. It's not real. And then it goes on a bit further. It's getting closer and closer and I'm like totally shitting myself. So I like kind of position myself a little bit behind the kayaker because I'm aware of the rules, don't touch anything, don't draft if anything. So I'm kind of like just swimming slowly behind the kayaker and like looking forward and they didn't tell me what had happened, but eventually the whole thing went away and I felt a lot better. And I thought, maybe my hallucinations just finished. But I found out later from the crew, because you find out all these things later because they don't necessarily want to waste your time or freak you out during the swim. I found out later that the Bahamian Navy were concerned that we were a threat to the country. They didn't know what we were doing, who we were. They came out. And so these 2 boats came out like from nowhere because it's pitch black, lights, and they had machine guns and they were questioning, machine guns. They were questioning my crew, like, what are you doing? have you got permissions to do this?
Yeah.
And I had actually spoken to representatives of the Bahamian government in advance to say, look, I want to do this swim. Do I need any special permissions? Because when I wanted to swim between Cuba and USA the year before, I needed shitloads of permissions.
I bet.
So that was a procedure that I was used to.
Yep.
And when I'd spoken to the department representative, they'd said, well, you're not actually crossing any national borders. So you don't need to officially inform us of anything. That's fine. Just do whatever you want to do.
Yep.
So I'd made contact, but obviously someone else had become worried during the swim that we were doing this. It wasn't a very highly publicized event. So, they just had not heard about it. And no one had told them internally. And they came to check us out and made sure they brought all their artillery with them.
Wow. So your hallucinations turned into real machine guns.
Yeah. Yeah, and the blue strobe light was not alien.
not aliens. Wow. Yeah. That's a crazy story. That's awesome. I love that story. So here's another question from Colin Hill Swims. And he said, I'd like to hear you talk about your swim idols. Who are your swim idols?
Well, when I first got into marathon swimming, I definitely idolized Alison Streeter. So for those of you that haven't come across Alison yet, before myself, she was the only other woman and one of 3 people in the world to swim a triple non-stop English Channel crossing. So I was just like a deer in headlights. I was like, this woman is amazing. And on top of that, she holds, and she still does hold, the world record for the most crossings of the English Channel. So she's swum the English Channel 43 times. So the next person with the highest crossing is a man, Kevin Murphy, and he's swum it 34 times. So she's like well above the man with the greatest number of crossings. So I really idolized her, and I sent her an email once, and she got back to me, and I was like, oh my God, I totally had a fangirl moment. She's not really active in the open water swimming community anymore, and hasn't been for well over a decade. So unfortunately, I haven't met her, but I really do hope one year that I'll get to meet Alison and tell her in person how amazing I think she is.
That's awesome. And her brother is a captain, right, of the Suva?
Yes. So Lance has helped many people swim the English Channel. Alison's mother, Frida, was an absolute powerhouse in coaching and supporting not just English people, but people from all across the world to swim the English Channel. I used to have lots of great chats with Frida when she was on the beach. So for those of you that are not familiar with English Channel swimming, Frida Streeter was on the beach now. I'm not going to say how many years in a row because I'll get it wrong, but I'm thinking at least 10 years, nearly most weekends between April and September, she would, as in Saturday and Sunday, she would be on this beach supporting, mentoring, coaching swimmers who wanted to swim the English Channel. So they were either training for it for that year to next year or whatever, or they'd flown in from some international location and they were within days or weeks getting ready to swim the Channel. So there are a few people who have contributed more to the development of but English Channel swimming specifically than Frida Streeter. She's been absolutely an incredible part of Channel swimming history.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So let me ask a couple of other questions. So Drew K 2005 also wants to know, have you wanted to quit during a marathon swim?
I've had some really painful experiences swimming the English Channel. I think that one of the essential qualities of marathon swimming is that you endure something, whether it's the distance, the physical pain, the mental torture of the monotony. So there have been times where I've been like, I just want this to end. Like I want this to finish. But for me, the pull and the draw card of wanting to keep going is nearly always stronger because I rationalize to myself when I'm in those really painful moments is that if I ever want to complete this swim again, I'm going to have to go back, do all the training preparation, get back to the start line, swim all the way to this point, then hit this same point again, probably, to then keep going. So to ever have this opportunity again is going to take so much time, energy, logistics, money, because this is not a sport which is supported by others financially, really. that it's just, I think I know the costs, the opportunity cost to ever get to that point again is really high. So what I'm talking about here is not necessarily, say, a single crossing of the English Channel, which for me now is fairly routine, but things like doing a double crossing or attempting a triple or a quadruple or, you know, any other big swim, because I've been through some extremely painful moments. The only time I had opted out of a marathon swim was when I knew, well, within my own sense of knowing, because I'm not a doctor, cannot diagnose anything. But I had a very strong sense that I had swimming-induced pulmonary edema during one of my attempts at a triple crossing of the English Channel, and that was in 2012. Because I had all the symptoms, I was aware of the condition. I'd been hospitalized the year before with the same condition. I thought, look, you know I can swim for further. I can probably get another 2, 3 or 4 hours out of myself, but I'm not going to finish this third crossing, even if I keep pushing myself. So in the end, the result is the same. So for those of you that don't know a lot about English Channel swimming, even if you swim 9/10 of the English Channel, it's not an official channel crossing.
Right.
So there are many people that walk around who have, you know, nearly completed the crossing, who are like, oh yeah, I swam the channel. But unless you actually cross that water line at France and get out, you haven't swum the channel. Exactly. So I knew that swimming 2, 3, 4 hours extra may have looked better on a graph, may have sounded better because I was in the water for longer, but actually there really was no good point continuing because my goal was to finish that crossing of 3. There was no way with this condition that I could finish it. So I said, look, I was like, I'm struggling to breathe. I need to get out. So I have pulled out of swims before.
Pulmonary hypodina, did you say?
So the short term for that, the acronym is SIPE. So that's swimming induced pulmonary edema. So
edema. Okay.
Have you come across this phenomenon before?
I have not. So what is exactly, is it a breathing issue or?
It's a dying issue, basically.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of interest, I guess, in our open water swimming circles about this because it's taken out swimmers, as in it's stopped swimmers being able to complete their swims in the English Channel over a certain period of time. In fact, it's probably affected swimmers since channel swimming started, but there was just not the understanding of that it was an actual particular condition that had certain symptoms, and then those symptoms then caused whatever happened to the swimmer to happen. So for example, to give you an idea physiologically what's going on, now I don't have a very good definition, but I'll just give you my best. What's happening is that there is an overload of blood in the internal organs, so in your heart, your lungs, etc. So if a swimmer gets hypothermia, and that's when their core temperature drops below 35 Celsius, then the body goes into survival mode and it shunts blood to the core region, which is, you know, your chest region where most of your organs are. And it's a survival mechanism because, you know, your reptilian brain, the really old part of our brain, is like, okay, well, your hands and your arms and your legs, they don't really need blood to survive, but your internal organs do. So it's a survival mechanism, but if too much of this happens, then the heart just gets overwhelmed. It goes, nah, I can't handle this much blood. So then it has to get rid of this excess blood. And what it does is it just pushes it into the lungs. Now the lungs process this. So then they're actually filling up with fluid. So it's kind of like you're drowning then in your own fluid. It's an internal thing. So the first time this happened to me, the doctors in ICU in Canterbury Hospital, which is a town close to Dover where English Channel swim starts, they didn't even know about this condition, and this was in 2011. So what they thought had happened to me is they thought I'd aspired seawater, so that I was in a semi-conscious state, most likely from hypothermia and maybe exhaustion, and that I'd had, without realizing it, I'd inhaled some water. So I had to be slightly conscious to be swimming. But then probably not so conscious because I wouldn't consciously breathe in seawater or whatever. So that was the official reason they gave me. No one really knew and different until I learned a bit more about this condition. And then I started talking to researchers who kind of specialize in this area. Yes, so I just don't think any marathon swim is worth dying for.
Exactly.
Even though I don't want to come back and reattempt things, it's not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if I know that my health is going to deteriorate to the point where it would be hard for me to get back to my starting position, my base position, then then it's not worth going those few extra hours for. So there's this fine line, and there's a lot of pressure on crews who support marathon swimmers because they have the same goals as a swimmer. They want them to get to the other side, but then they also don't want to pull them out too early and curtail the chance of successfully finishing their swim, because it's has a big psychological effect on swimmers when you pull them out of a swim.
Right.
But then on the other hand, if something goes wrong and it was the crew's responsibility to pick that up and pull that swimmer out, and they didn't pull them out in time, then they have the responsibility of this person being in ICU for a few days or weeks, or potentially never recovering to the point of health that they're at before they start that marathon swimming, or dying. So there's I believe 8 swimmers who have swum the English Channel since channel swimming started back in the late 1800s. They've died. Now, at least one of them was because the boat lost them. But the other ones, there's a very good chance that they got swimming-induced pulmonary edema. But the thing is, once someone's died, it's actually very hard to tell exactly what caused the death, because if they die while swimming, they're going to have lots of seawater in their lungs. So it's like, well, what killed them?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the family may know, like an autopsy would be done. The family may know more information, but they may not want to release that information. That's right. I suspect swimming-induced pulmonary edema has been a big factor in a lot of the very few. There were 8 deaths in like 150 years or something. Is actually a tiny amount. You're more likely to die running a marathon somewhere, especially the London Marathon. Heaps of people die every year.
Right.
Comparative. So I'm not saying English Channel swimming you're likely to die, but it is good to know that there's, that is a risk, and it can be managed very well by the crew watching the swimmers and just looking for symptoms. So if someone's struggling to breathe, then that's a very high chance they've got this condition, and you should pull them out.
And you were able to self-diagnose that, and you were having trouble breathing, and that's when you raised the alert?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose, but I was conscious enough to realize that I was struggling to breathe.
Yes.
To the point where we're having a conversation now and I can maintain a steady pace.
Yep.
So when I was trying to tell my crew that I was struggling to breathing, it was something like this. It was like,
wow.
I'm struggling to breathe. So I couldn't even say 2 sentences without needing to take a lot of extra breaths.
Right. Which
meant that my oxygen concentration, so the flow and the volume of oxygen in my blood, was definitely low. So how could I swim, which requires a huge amount of exertion for the body? How can I perform that when I can't even talk?
Exactly.
So that was, as far as I can recall, it's the only time where I've said to the crew, this is not going to work. I can't keep going. And they'd already noticed that my pace had slowed down quite a lot. They hadn't said anything at that point, but I'd noticed that I just felt like I had no energy.
Yep.
And I know sometimes marathon swimmers, they may run out of energy during a marathon swim. And usually it's kind of a different type of running out of energy. It's more like that their body's not processing the carbohydrates coming in from their feeds, running out of energy. Like you've bonked, like you've kind of given it your all. You've surpassed a point where your effort has gone further than what your body can keep up with.
Yep.
So this didn't feel like that I'd overexerted myself. This just felt like my power had gone. It was like someone turned the engine off and I was just spinning wheels. So, yeah.
That's great advice because, swimming-induced pulmonary edema is it's good to know for not only for swimmers like us, but also for the crew, so that they can, have those conversations during the feed and say, are you having a tough time breathing? And that knowledge, I think, will make everyone safer. But I think not only informing your crew and having a good crew, but also being able to, know your own personal limits is really important in this sport, because people who do marathon swimming, we have the ability to kind of mentally go beyond what many other people can, and that ability can also be a detriment, because we can sometimes
it can be an Achilles heel too.
yeah, because we might go beyond what we should be doing, right? Yeah, because we push ourselves to the edge. That's amazing.
Just on that point, if there are crews listening in, there's a really good point that you said, that it's good for them to kind of keep monitoring the swimmer.
Yep.
So most established marathon swims will, like the English Channel or the Seven Ocean swims, for example, they will have an observer on there officially that would look out for these things.
Yep.
But it is good for the swimmer's own crew that they bring onto the boat to know these things as well. So the things to look out for was if their stroke rate drops.
Yep.
So that's in the first, say, 2 hours of the swim, monitor your swimmer's stroke rate, which means that you count the number of strokes they swim. So every time their hand enters the water, you count that as another stroke.
Yep.
So most swimmers will swim between 50 and 70 strokes a minute. So if you get that gauge in the first 2 hours, take it a few times, because they might get a little bit overexcited at the start and then have a high stroke rate. So take it the first few times and figure out what their average is. And then for later points during the swim, you'll know if they've dropped a lot. So if they drop, and it's a significant drop, if they drop 15 or 20 strokes below their average stroke rate, then that is definitely something that, I don't know the word, it's like a red flag that you should then think, is there something going wrong? Like ask the swimmer, do they need more energy? So do you need to put more carbohydrate into their feeds to help their energy go up? Do they need more caffeine for a pep? Or is it something else? Do they have some sort of condition coming on? Right. So hypothermia would be probably the most common thing, or exhaustion. They're spent, they're out of energy. Or potentially it could hypothermia, which we think is one factor that can cause swimming-induced pulmonary edema, or maybe they've gone into that condition. So the first thing to look out for would be a drop in stroke rate.
Excellent. Yeah, one of the things that I did with my kayaker up in Lake Memphremagog for one of the Kingdom swims, this is either like the 10 mile or the Border Buster, which is about 15 miles, and like 25 kilometers. And that it was, you basically have like a few questions that you can answer easily, like, name your siblings, or what year is it, or something like that. And then you practice those questions and the answers with your kayaker, and then while you're swimming, if you're hypothermic or whatever, sometimes, I guess it's like being drunk, you start to lose the ability not only to self-diagnose and say, hey, I'm in trouble, but you start to lose the ability to answer simple questions. So if the kayaker sees that you're in trouble and starts asking those questions, and you aren't able to answer the simple questions, that might be a time for them to make the decision to have you pulled.
Yeah, that's a really, really good advice, and it's fairly common in the community. But if you're new to marathon swimming, you may not be aware of that yet. So it's really good to really remind people. That's a really good strategy, not just during the marathon swims, but also in training, in long swims, when people are building up their ability to do long swims.
Definitely. That's awesome. All right, so let's go to our final question. What is next for Chloe?
Well, I was hoping to swim the English Channel this year, but at the moment that's looking a bit shaky.
Oh, man.
We're not even allowed to leave the country. Oh, that was, if you saw something white just walk past, that was my dog.
Oh.
I think there's a minimal chance I'll be able to get a flight out of Australia in the next 6 months. So at this point, I don't think I'm going to be able to swim the English Channel this year. So I had 3 single crossings that were due.
Wow.
So I think I'll do them next year. So one of the things I've been doing to keep busy in this COVID crisis is to research and develop new projects for myself and figure out ways that I can connect with the community and add value to, people that are looking for something, some sort of skill that I could offer. So one of the things that I said that I was doing in Australia was this leadership development in the corporate world, and while I was working in things like communication skills, leadership development, and it's an area that I've fallen in love with. So I'm working on creating a new community, which is just for women. It's
Yeah.
leadership development, communication, and skills that they can then learn and transfer into their workplace to put them in a stronger position. So for hopefully a promotion or a pay rise or more responsibility within their role, or eventually moving into leadership positions. So I think in the world we're in now, where there's less jobs because of the economic crisis we're under, it would be more developing skills to get back into the workforce if you've been forced to leave the workforce because of the crisis. So putting yourself in a really good position to really, because it's going to be a very competitive employment. To get employment is going to be very, very competitive moving forward. So you're going to have to find some sort of skills or experience to put yourself against everyone else vying for that same job that you want. So I think the focus for me will be helping people in that position rather than, say, promotions or pay rise at the moment, which I think really for the next 18 to 2 months, is going to be, something that's more on the back burner. It's more just survival and getting back into the workforce for a lot of people.
Awesome. That's amazing. Well, Chloë, this has been an amazing interview, and I really appreciate you spending the time with me. It's great to see you again. And for those watching, look up Chloë McCardel, McCardel on Google. She's on Facebook, on Instagram. You can also find her website with more information about her. And keep track of what's going on. And we'd love to have you back someday. So we'll have to stay in touch, and would be an honor to interview.
Let's go for a swim when the COVID crisis is over.
Definitely. I'd love that. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
And Australia is on my list. I need to get out to Bondi Beach, right?
Yeah, that's like 30 minutes from me. Come to Australia.
That's like the coolest place. That's awesome. All right.
All right. Lovely chatting.
All right. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.